5 key reasons why we get stuck in a rut and how we can change them. And when Joseph called me up and said, can you do something on seeing you in the winner's circle? I was thinking of my very early mentor who actually wrote a book called I'll See You in the Winner's Circle. Anybody know who that is? He used to sell pots and pans? Zig Ziglar. And then he wrote a book called I'll See You Over the Top. Way back about 25 years ago when I first got started as a speaker for corporate audiences, he was the very first person who showed me what to do. And he taught me a few things that I'm going to share with you right now. Some of this I think is relevant, some of it you've heard before, but it's always good to hear good things again. And the 5 reasons we get stuck in ruts, in my experience, is number 1, a lack of goals. If we don't have goals, we're not going to get anywhere, and wherever we end up is going to have to be okay. And that affects a lot of people in this country, particularly in hard times, primarily because they're too nervous to have goals. And they're waiting for the economy to change. They're waiting for things to get better. So instead of setting goals, they keep doing what they've always done, hoping things will change. And of course, nothing changes. I always thought that goals were a little bit like a rudder on a ship. Without a rudder, a ship would drift on the open ocean and maybe get lucky enough to come into a port. But the odds are it's going to end up crashing on the rocks. Rudders allow you to apply all of your power, your ambition, your drive, and your determination to a specific finish line. So having a goal is like having a rudder on a ship. There's something else about goals that I think is important, and that is you can't have too many of them. And a lot of us have a to-do list with about 30 items on it. And if we're honest with ourselves, we realize that we push that to-do list off every 24 hours, and at the end of 6 months, 20 of those items are still on the list. So something is just not right about that. What I've learned is that it's a good idea to have goals, but set them for the 5 most important parts of your life. And I speak for myself. Number 1, health. Health is a great place to have goals. Good, bad, or indifferent, all of us are going to be facing health problems. I've had a couple of challenges in the past couple of years, and if you don't take it seriously, your doctor's not going to do it for you. So having goals where your health is concerned is number 1 in my book. Number 2 is money. Who here would like to have more money? Every hand in the room is going to go up, of course. Some of us buy lottery tickets hoping that we'll be like that woman who was watching TV the other day and her grandmother called her up and said, you better turn the news on. Anybody know which story I'm talking about? Yeah, how much did she win? $25 million, and she had the lottery ticket stuck in the glove compartment of her car with about 100 others that she had never checked on. So that's not necessarily the best way to have money goals. If you're going to buy a lottery ticket, I recommend that you keep it in your purse or your wallet and check the number. She had 4 days to redeem the ticket or forfeit the $25 million. The good news is she redeemed the ticket, she got the $25 million. Next in life is career. A lot of us say we want money, but we don't look at career as a source to get it. And in reality, without career, without a contribution to society, money isn't that plentiful. Zig once told me something I'll never forget. You can have everything in life you want if you help enough other people get what they want. Anybody here remember that famous comment? All of us do. And it's true. When you ask yourself, how do I get more income? You have to ask yourself, how can I make more contribution? Not just to my neighbors, but to all the people that I'm going to meet. Next, I think for goals, is good to have a good goal for relationships. Not just with family and close friends, but your neighbors and the people in your community. So you can write down goals about that. And then finally is the community. A lot of us live in neighborhoods where we don't even know who our neighbors are. I'm guilty of that. I live in a condo complex and I only know who the people are on each side of me. And there are 600 units. So I walk past strangers every day of my life not knowing who they are. My goal for next year is going to be to learn who my neighbors are and get involved a little more with the people I live around. One of the things about goals that's important is that they have to be measurable, they have to be reasonable. For example, you can't say I'm going to earn $1 million next year unless you've already earned $1 million this year. They have to be easily identifiable. You got to know when you've reached the goal. And then finally, you need to celebrate when you hit a goal. Let other friends know. Let your family and your friends know that you've reached a milestone. And then set another goal. Next, most people don't have a plan. even if they have the goals, they don't have the plan to do something to achieve the goals. And one of the metaphors I like to use is the ship. Again, the ship has a rudder. How many of you have been on a cruise ship? Quite almost all of us, yeah. If you ever notice that when you get on the ship, you can't see where you're going to end up? I mean, if you get on the bow of the ship and you look out, all you see is open water. So how is it the captain is able to make that ship arrive at a specific location every time, regardless of wind, regardless of conditions? And the way they do it is because they've got a plan. Now, I've been a pilot for 45 years, and I can tell you that every time, I used to fly in the Air Force. I fly private planes now. But every time we start the engine, we have a plan. We know where we're going. We know when we're going to get there. We know what the conditions are between here and there. And you have to constantly communicate. So to have a plan, I put down here some of the most important things that a ship's captain does. Number one, navigation. You got to know where you are compared to where you want to be. And you have to know what the distance is between them. And a lot of us just only think of the destination and we don't think of the journey. Number two, you have to communicate. In an aircraft, there's no way in the world you can fly over this valley called the San Gabriel Valley or the Los Angeles Valley without being in communication, not with one, but with 4 different radio controllers. To fly from Ontario to Santa Monica, which I do on a regular basis, I have to talk to 4 different radar controllers, and they hand you off from one to another. So everybody knows where you are, who you are, where you're going, and what you're up to. And they help you to not hit other flyers, which comes in real handy sometimes over this valley. Next, a captain will recalculate. If you've ever used a GPS and you don't do what the GPS tells you, what does it usually say? Recalculating, or something like that. And I'm always wondering how it knows I didn't make that turn. But it knows, and so it's accurate within 10 feet. So it tells me that it's going to recalculate and tell me to take the other toll road, which I don't want to take. And then finally, captains adjust for variances. If the wind's blowing a little out of the left, they're going to turn the ship to the left. They're going to make up for it. Same in an airplane. If I've got a crosswind of 20 knots coming off the right wing, I steer the plane to the right. Now, the plane looks like it's flying crooked, but it's actually going in a straight line. So that's how we have a plan. You've got to plan it out ahead of time from beginning to end. Next on my list of 5 is lack of focus. How many people in the room feel like you're overwhelmed with distractions? Okay, the rest of you aren't being honest. We are all overwhelmed with distractions. Television, 340 channels, half of which, if I could, I'd make them not even show up. But there's 340 channels of television. Radio, AM, FM, XM, Sirius. It is a lot of distraction. Other drivers. I consider other drivers a distraction. It's hard to enjoy a drive these days. Have you noticed? You can't take your eyes off the road. You can't be putting your lipstick on. You can't be having a sandwich. And you can't be talking on the phone. You get big tickets for some of that stuff. But other drivers are the biggest distraction of all. Then we have newsprint and magazines. Anybody here get more than 5 magazines a month? I have them stacked up in my bathroom. I started a little experiment a year ago. The experiment's up December 1st. I wanted to see how many magazines I got in 1 year. So instead of throwing them out, I stacked them up in the bathroom. I mean, it's a good place to put them. After all, nobody asks questions, like, why are those magazines there? Well, you know why they're there. Yeah. I've got 3 stacks 2 feet high. I'm going to be changing my habits with magazines going into 2013. And then finally, we have the internet. If anybody can honestly sit in this room and tell me the internet is not a distraction, I'll buy you a cocktail. You need it. And that would be a distraction also. Over 1 trillion pages on the internet with over 1 million being added every single 24 hours. You could get lost in there and nobody would ever know you got lost and never find you again. If you add up the time that's not focused on your goals, you'd be amazed at how much time gets siphoned off, not leaving you with enough time to actually achieve your goals, let alone plan for them. Now, here's my fix for this. My son taught it to me about a year ago. He said, Dad, every control that you have that turns things on also turns them off. Figure out where the off button is and use it. And it works. A lot of times I'll be driving down the highway and the biggest button of all, the most convenient one on my dash, turns the radio off. Click it, and all of a sudden, life becomes a little more manageable. In my house, I have 4 remote controls sitting on my coffee table. Steve Jobs would be aghast. He didn't like that kind of thing. He liked simplicity. And every one of those remote controls has an off button. Sandy and I both know where they are, and we use them a lot. So that helps. And then finally, one of the things that we do as adults is we stop learning. Not all the way, but we stop learning enough so that we don't let our minds and our brains get a little exercise. I like to learn to do it myself. My attitude is, if anybody else can do it, so can I. Now, the possible exception might be what Cheryl does. I'm not sure I could give myself a doctor's procedure. I'm not sure I can put a cap on my tooth, but I'd sure like to read about it before she does it. And that way I'll know what's going on. Computers are the best way to learn anything. If you ever want to know information, the computer's the first place I go. Years ago, I had a printer that I just couldn't let go of. It was an old HP LaserJet 4. How many remember that? Remember the LaserJet 4? Built like a tank. It was like the original Polaroid land camera. And it just wouldn't die. And the thing is, it was so cheap to use that when it quit working, I went on the internet and found out how to fix it. And literally tore the printer apart and fixed it myself one Saturday afternoon with a little kit that I paid about $16 for. I did that 3 times before I finally gave it up. By the 3rd time, I knew how to fix it. I didn't have to go on the internet. So learning things have a lot of benefits. I put them down here. It keeps your mind alert and sharp. It also improves your memory, something I could certainly use, and it increases your self-confidence. It's nice to know you can do things without having to call somebody half your age. Next, you can save money by doing it once, many times. Once you learn how to do something, why not fix it yourself? And then finally, you have that feeling of accomplishment. The last thing I'm going to share with you about what I think is winning and being in the winner's circle is we have to learn to adapt. I think a lot of us stop adapting. I know when this economic downturn started in 2008, 2009, a lot of people said to me, you know, this will be over within a year. Things are going to come back. It'll all turn around. The more informed friends in my circle were saying, don't kid yourself. It'll never be like it was. And when it does turn around, it won't look like it once did. So you need to adapt. I once had the opportunity of doing some work in Alaska, and I met some people that lived up by the northern shore of Alaska. If you've never been there, you have no idea what it's like. It is hell on earth. The temperature averages about 35 below zero. It's dark 8 months out of the year. It's a terrible place, and the food they eat is, honestly, you'd have a hard time eating it, and that's putting it mildly. If you know who Andrew Zimmerman is, Zimmerman's on the TV, and he eats anything on the planet. The one and only time he admitted on TV that there was food he could not stomach was in northern Alaska. He said, I couldn't do it. So we need to learn to adapt. Medical conditions force us to adapt. Why not adapt to changing times without being forced? It reminds me of a funny story about a guy who finally had all he could take. Couldn't earn enough money, didn't have friends who could loan him money, couldn't find the job he wanted, so he started looking for a job where he'd get 3 square meals a day and a little respect. And finally, he ended up interviewing for a job as a monk. So he goes to the monastery and he interviews for the job, and the abbot says, why should we bring you into the monastery? And our friend says, well, I won't give you any trouble. I don't have a big mouth. I have no opinion. And all I want is 3 square meals a day, and I want to be left alone. The abbot says, you know what? You sound like the perfect candidate, so here's the rules if we let you in. You can only speak 2 words every 10 years, and they have to be to me in private. Can you do that? Well, our man says, considering the circumstances, I could do anything. Takes the job. 10 years go by. He comes before the abbot, and he had a lot to say. But he only had 2 words. So the first 2 words are food, cold. The abbot says, that'll be fine. Go back to your duties. 10 more years went by before he could speak again. He came before the abbot and said, bed hard. The abbot said, taken under advisement. You can go back to your duties. 10 more years go by. And our friend comes to the abbot and says, I quit. And the abbot says, I'm not a bit surprised. You've been complaining since the day you got here. In summary, how we are and who we are really add up to all the little choices we made to get this far. I think you all know that. We've heard it a million times. Let's be more aware of the impact we have on our own reality, and let's judge other people with less harshness and ourselves with a little more reality, and I'll see you in the winner's circle. Thanks.